In the small Texas town of Dickinson, located in Galveston County, life flowed steadily and peacefully until the night of August 10th, 1990. Even the most experienced police officers couldn't have anticipated the shock that awaited their community. 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett was an ordinary, cheerful girl. During those summer days of 1990, she was enjoying her vacation, playing with friends, and dreaming about the future. Like many children her age, Jennifer was full of energy and curiosity. On the night of August 10th, Jennifer, as usual, went to bed in her room in the apartment where she lived with her mother. The window was slightly open due to the hot Texas weather. Nothing foreshadowed trouble. The night in Dickinson seemed quiet and safe, like many others. But that night, the tranquility was disturbed. An unknown perpetrator, taking advantage of the open window, entered the sleeping girl's room. Jennifer was abducted, right from her own bed. The criminal acted quietly and discreetly. None of the neighbors heard any suspicious sounds or screams. The next morning, Jennifer's mother discovered her daughter's bed empty. The room looked almost untouched, but the girl was nowhere to be found. At first, there was a thought that she might have gone to neighbors or friends, but a quick round of calls to acquaintances yielded no results. Realizing that something terrible had happened, her mother immediately contacted the police. Within hours, the quiet town of Dickinson turned into the center of large-scale search operations. The Galveston County Police began an investigation, neighbors were questioned, and search groups were organized. News of the missing girl quickly spread throughout the vicinity. Volunteers joined the search, combing nearby areas in hopes of finding any traces. While police and volunteers combed Dickinson in search of Jennifer, the girl herself was in a desperate situation. Her abductor had taken her outside the city to a remote field near an abandoned road. After committing his crime, he inflicted severe injuries on Jennifer and left her in the field, believing the girl would not survive. Jennifer had serious injuries, including deep throat wounds that prevented her from screaming or calling for help. But contrary to all the criminal's expectations, the girl remained alive. Despite her young age, she showed incredible strength of spirit and will to live. Lying in the field, unable to move or speak, Jennifer remained conscious. She understood that she had to fight for her life. Tormented by thirst and pain, she stayed conscious, hoping that someone would find her. On the morning of August 11th, approximately 14 hours after the abduction, a group of workers passing by the abandoned road noticed something unusual in the field. Coming closer, they were horrified to discover a severely injured girl. Despite being unable to speak, Jennifer was conscious. The workers immediately called for an ambulance and the police. Medical personnel arriving at the scene were amazed that the girl was still alive, considering the severity of her injuries and the long time spent without help in the open air. Jennifer was urgently transported to the nearest hospital, where doctors began fighting for her life. At the hospital, medical staff diagnosed serious injuries that could have been fatal. The girl underwent emergency surgery. Doctors did everything possible, but the injuries were so severe that complete recovery seemed unlikely. Damage to her vocal cords was an especially serious problem. Doctors weren't sure if Jennifer would ever be able to speak again. While Jennifer was in the hospital, detectives from the Dickinson Police Department began an intensive investigation. This case became a priority for the entire department. The best detectives were brought in, as well as specialists from nearby cities. The first step was examining the crime scenes, both the apartment from which Jennifer was abducted and the field where she was found. Forensic experts collected all possible evidence: fingerprints from the windowsill and other surfaces in the girl's room, soil and vegetation samples from where the victim was found, and tire tracks on the dirt road next to the field. Special attention was paid to collecting biological samples. In 1990, DNA analysis technology was just beginning to be used in forensics, but investigators understood its potential value. They carefully collected and preserved all samples of biological material found at the crime scene. In parallel, detectives questioned all residents of the area where Jennifer lived. They looked for witnesses who might have seen something suspicious on the night of the abduction. Unfamiliar cars, strange people, or unusual activity. People with criminal backgrounds living in the area were also checked, especially those previously convicted of crimes against children. Investigators compiled an approximate timeline of events. According to their estimates, the abduction occurred between 2 and 3 a.m., The perpetrator likely took Jennifer away in a vehicle, which was confirmed by tire tracks near the field. The distance from the apartment to where the girl was found was about 5 kilometers. Despite all efforts, the first weeks of investigation did not bring substantial results. The police had neither reliable witnesses nor a clear description of the suspect. The only person who had seen the abductor was Jennifer herself, but due to her serious condition, she couldn't give testimony. Doctors' prognoses regarding Jennifer's health were cautious. After several surgeries, her life was out of danger, but recovery promised to be long and difficult. The loss of her voice due to throat injury remained an especially serious problem. For several weeks after the attack, Jennifer could only communicate through notes. She quickly learned to express her thoughts in writing, demonstrating remarkable psychological resilience for a child who had experienced such trauma. After several months of intensive therapy, what many considered impossible happened. Jennifer began to speak. At first, it was just a whisper, but gradually her voice grew stronger. This became a real breakthrough, not only for her recovery, but also for the investigation. As soon as Jennifer was able to communicate, investigators carefully began to question her about the events of that night. Despite her young age, she showed remarkable observational skills and ability to recall details. Jennifer was able to describe the person who abducted her. According to her, the abductor was a white man with dark hair and a mustache. He introduced himself as a police officer and told her that her mother had been in an accident. This was how he forced the girl to go with him. Jennifer remembered that he smoked cigarettes and drove a dark car, though she later described it as a white or light-colored two-door vehicle. Based on Jennifer's description, a police artist created a composite portrait of the suspect, which was distributed throughout the region. The sketch was shown on local television and published in newspapers. The police hoped that someone would recognize this man and provide information. Despite the appearance of the composite portrait and the active work of investigators, Jennifer Schuett's case gradually grew cold. Dozens of calls with information came in from citizens, but none led to a breakthrough in the investigation. The Dickinson Police Department continued to keep the case open. Periodically, new detectives reviewed the materials, hoping to find overlooked clues or new approaches to the investigation. Nevertheless, as time passed, activity on the case decreased. For Jennifer, these years were a time of recovery and adaptation to a new reality. Physical injuries gradually healed, although complete voice recovery did not occur. Her speech remained slightly hoarse forever. The psychological consequences were no less serious. Nightmares, fear of darkness, and distrust of strangers became part of her life. However, Jennifer showed remarkable resilience. With the support of her family and psychologists, she gradually returned to normal life. She went back to school, where she initially faced difficulties due to increased attention to her story, but over time was able to find her place in the school community. As Jennifer grew older, she thought more and more about what had happened to her. She began collecting information about her case, cutting out newspaper articles and recording everything she could remember about the night of the attack. Gradually, a determination grew within her not to let the perpetrator remain unpunished. By the early 2000s, Jennifer Schuett's case had become one of the most famous unsolved crimes in the history of Galveston County. Every year, on the anniversary of the attack, local media remembered this story, but there was no real progress in the investigation. It seemed that the criminal would never be found. By the mid-2000s, a real revolution had occurred in the world of forensics. DNA analysis technologies had significantly improved, allowing work with minimal and even degraded samples. Throughout the country, old, unsolved cases began to be reviewed using new technologies. In 2008, almost 18 years after the attack, Jennifer Schuett's case got a second chance. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, launched an initiative to review old cases using new DNA analysis methods. Jennifer's case was included in this program. By this time, Jennifer Schuett was already an adult woman. She never gave up hope of finding the person who had destroyed her childhood. Learning about the new FBI initiative, she actively got involved in the process, providing additional information and memories that could help the investigation. Preserved biological material samples from the crime scene were sent to the FBI laboratory for analysis using the latest technologies. The process was complicated due to the age and condition of the samples, But the forensic experts didn't give up. In parallel, FBI Special Agent Tim Crompty and Texas Department of Public Safety Detective Richard Riedel began studying all case materials anew. They reviewed witness testimonies, reanalyzed evidence, and looked for new approaches to the investigation. Work with DNA brought the first results in early 2009. Experts were able to isolate the attacker's DNA profile from preserved samples. This profile was entered into CODIS, Combined DNA Index System, a national database containing genetic profiles of criminals and evidence from crime scenes. For Jennifer and the investigators, this was a huge breakthrough. Now there was a possibility of identifying the attacker if his DNA was already in the database, or if he would ever be arrested and his DNA added to the system. In October 2009, what Jennifer had been waiting for almost 2 decades finally happened. The CODIS system found a match with the DNA profile. The genetic material preserved from the crime scene against Jennifer matched the DNA of a man named Dennis Earl Bradford. Bradford, at the time of the match, was in an Arkansas prison, serving a sentence for a similar crime. In 1996, he was convicted of kidnapping and assaulting a young woman. It was in connection with this crime that his DNA was entered into the CODIS system. The investigation into Bradford's identity revealed shocking facts. In 1990, when the attack on Jennifer occurred, he was 29 years old. He worked as a welder and often moved from place to place looking for work. During the period of the kidnapping, Bradford lived in League Cities, just a few kilometers from Dickinson, where Jennifer lived. Even before the attack on Jennifer, Bradford had a criminal history. In the 1980s, he had already been convicted of a similar crime in another state, but was released on parole. After his release, he moved to Texas, where, as it now became known, he committed the attack on Jennifer Schuett. Bradford's physical description matched what Jennifer remembered about her abductor. Dark hair, mustache, average height, even the car that Bradford owned in 1990, a light-colored 2-door Chevrolet Cavalier, corresponded to the description given by Jennifer. When Jennifer was shown Bradford's photograph, she instantly recognized him. For her, it was a moment of colossal emotional shock. For the first time in 19 years, she saw the face of the man who had changed her life forever. Based on the DNA match and other evidence, Dennis Earl Bradford was charged with the kidnapping and assault of Jennifer Schuett. In October 2009, he was formally charged and extradited from Arkansas to Texas for trial. News of the arrest of a suspect in the attack on Jennifer Schuett quickly spread throughout Dickinson and all of Texas. For many city residents who remembered this crime, the news was a long-awaited relief. For Jennifer herself, Bradford's arrest meant the possibility of finally closing this chapter of her life. After being charged, Dennis Bradford appeared before the Galveston County Court. He faced life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The evidence against him was irrefutable. DNA match, victim identification, matching description, and vehicle. However, the court proceedings took an unexpected turn. On May 10, 2010, just a few months after his arrest and before the start of a full trial, Dennis Bradford was found dead in his cell. He had committed suicide, leaving a suicide note, the contents of which were not fully disclosed to the public. Bradford's death caused mixed feelings for Jennifer. On one hand, she had hoped to see him stand trial and hear the verdict. On the other hand, his death meant the final conclusion to this chapter of her life. And Jennifer Schuett's story became a symbol of the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of never giving up in the search for justice. Her case also highlighted the significance of preserving DNA evidence and continuing to work on unsolved cases even decades later. After the case closed, Jennifer did not fade into the shadows. On the contrary, she transformed her experience into a mission to help other victims of violent crimes. She began giving public speeches, sharing her story, and inspiring other survivors not to lose hope. Jennifer became an active advocate for legislative changes aimed at improving methods for investigating crimes against children and increasing the retention periods for DNA evidence. She collaborated with various organizations helping violence victims and founded her own foundation to support children who have experienced traumatic events. Jennifer's story attracted the attention of national media. Documentaries and television programs were made about her, including an episode of the popular CBS program 48 Hours. These projects helped bring her story to millions of people, inspiring other survivors and reminding society of the importance of persistence in seeking justice. Today, Jennifer Schuett continues her work as an advocate for crime victims. She has created a family and found happiness despite the traumatic experience of her childhood. Her life has become a testament that even after the darkest moments, recovery and growth are possible. Jennifer Schuett's case changed law enforcement's approach to investigating similar crimes. It emphasized the importance of preserving DNA evidence indefinitely and became an example of how technological progress can help solve seemingly hopeless cases. For the residents of Dickinson, Jennifer's story remains a reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, does arrive. For law enforcement agencies, her case serves as motivation never to give up in the search for truth. But the most important legacy of this story is Jennifer herself and her incredible strength of spirit. The girl who was left to die in a field not only survived, but grew into a strong woman who uses her experience to change the world for the better. Jennifer Schuett's story is not just an account of a terrible crime. It's a story about survival, resilience, hope, and ultimately the triumph of justice. It's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, one shouldn't lose hope, and that persistence and faith in justice can overcome even the longest delays.